My 18-year-old straight best friend fell in love with me. It started like every other friendship I'd ever had. Easy, light, full of jokes and late-night talks about girls we liked, games we played, and dreams that felt way too big for our small town. At 18, nothing felt serious. And yet, somehow everything felt like it could matter more than anything else in the world. He was the kind of guy everyone liked without trying. Confident, naturally charming, always surrounded by people. And yet, when it was just the two of us, I saw something quieter, something softer. I never thought much of it at first. I just knew I wanted to be around him, all the time. But then something changed. A look that lasted too long. A silence that felt heavy. A night I still replay in my head, wondering when friendship stopped being enough. This is the story of how I discovered that the boy who swore he was straight might have been falling for me all along. And what happened when I finally let myself feel it too. Before we dive into this story, make sure to subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, and turn on notifications. That's how we keep bringing real, emotional stories that stay with you long after the screen fades to black. Are you ready to feel something real? Let's begin. I still remember the first time I looked at him and felt something shift. It wasn't fireworks. It wasn't some overwhelming wave of desire or an immediate realization. It was just a pause, a moment. The kind you don't notice at first, until you catch yourself replaying it later in your head, again and again, trying to figure out why it felt different. His name was Cole. We were both 18, and we'd known each other since junior year. I wouldn't say we were instantly best friends, but something about him always pulled people in. Maybe it was the way he made everyone laugh without ever trying. Or maybe it was how he always remembered the smallest details, like the name of your dog or the kind of chips you liked. For me, it was how he looked at people, like they were the only ones in the room when he listened. And then, one day, I realized he'd started looking at me that way. It began with small things. We'd hang out in his garage after school, talking about college plans or playing music we'd pretend not to like. He'd steal glances when I was tuning the guitar, hold eye contact a little too long when I told a story, laugh a little harder at my jokes than anyone else did. At first, I thought I was imagining it, projecting feelings that weren't real. I'd always known I liked guys, but I'd never really said it out loud to anyone. Definitely not to Cole. He was straight. That was just who he was. And still, every time his arm brushed against mine or he sat closer than he needed to, something inside me buzzed. I started to notice the way he'd fidget with his hoodie string when he was nervous, or how his voice dropped a little when we were alone. How he'd let our silences linger longer than most people would. I didn't know what it meant. I just knew that being around him started to feel dangerous, in the best and worst way. One night, after we'd both bombed a math quiz, we drove to the lookout point just outside town. It was the place everyone went to drink or make out or watch the stars when they didn't want to be found. We didn't say much at first. We just sat there, legs stretched out over the hood of his car, a bag of sour candy between us. The cold wind bit at our cheeks, but neither of us moved. "I don't know if I even want to go to college," he said suddenly. I turned toward him. "You've been talking about Colorado State for months." "Yeah," he said, shrugging. "I don't know. Lately it just feels like nothing makes sense." I wanted to ask what had changed, but I was scared of the answer. Instead, I said, "You're not the only one who feels lost." He looked at me then, really looked. His eyes searched mine like they were trying to find something I hadn't said yet. And I felt it, that shift again, that tightening in my chest. He didn't say anything for a long time. Then, so quietly I almost missed it, he said, "Sometimes I wonder what people would think if they really knew me." The wind rustled through the trees. I could barely hear over my own heartbeat. "Maybe they'd understand," I said. "Maybe they wouldn't." He smiled, but it wasn't his usual grin. It was softer, almost sad. "I think you'd understand," he said. I didn't know what to say. My mouth opened, then closed again. I wanted to ask him what he meant. I wanted to ask if he ever thought about me the way I thought about him. If the reason he'd started pulling away from the group and spending more time with me had something to do with that. But I didn't. I just nodded. And then, in the silence that followed, he reached across the car hood and took a piece of candy from my hand, his fingers brushing against mine, slow and intentional. I felt that touch long after he pulled away, and for the first time I let myself wonder, what if I wasn't imagining it? The next few days after that night at the lookout felt different, not in an obvious way, not like something had happened exactly. But the air between us had changed. It carried a tension I couldn't define, like we were walking closer to a line neither of us knew how to name. Cole started texting me more. Not just the usual memes or jokes, but random, thoughtful things. "Did you ever end up finishing that book you told me about? This song reminded me of that drive we took last summer. Want to skip the cafeteria today and eat in the back lot?" I told myself it was nothing, that we were just closer now. But part of me knew I was lying. Because sometimes I'd catch him looking at me when he thought I wasn't paying attention. Sometimes when we laughed too hard, he'd pause like he didn't want the moment to end. And once, when we were changing for gym class, he caught my eyes lingering and didn't look away. He just smiled. I didn't know what to do with any of it. I was stuck between wanting to believe and being terrified of what believing might mean. I'd never told him I was into guys, not officially, but I guess I never really hid it either, and he never seemed surprised when I mentioned a celebrity crush that wasn't a girl. He just rolled with it. Cole had that way about him. He made space for people without making it weird. And maybe that's what scared me most. Because I didn't want space. I wanted clarity. I wanted to know if the way I felt wasn't just a one-way street. One afternoon, we ended up alone in his room. His mom was working late and the house was quiet. He had music playing low, one of those moody indie playlists I didn't know he liked. I was lying on his floor, tossing a tennis ball in the air, and he was on his bed, scrolling on his phone, barefoot, hoodie half unzipped. Comfortable, unfiltered. He suddenly said, "Hey, can I ask you something kind of weird?" I caught the ball mid-air. "Sure." He hesitated. "Do you think it's possible to, care about someone so much it scares you?" My throat tightened. "Yeah," I said. "I do." He didn't look at me, just stared at the ceiling. Like you don't know what to call it. You just feel it all the time. I sat up. "Are you talking about someone?" He finally turned his head, eyes meeting mine for just a second too long. "Maybe," he said. That word sat between us like a loaded secret. I wanted to ask him who. I wanted to say his name, just to see how he'd react. But I didn't. Because part of me was afraid I already knew the answer, and another part of me was afraid I was wrong. So instead I changed the subject. We played video games, ate chips, talked about stupid things, pretended nothing had shifted. But that night, lying in my bed staring at the ceiling, I couldn't stop hearing his voice. "Do you think it's possible to care about someone so much it scares you?" It echoed like a question he wanted me to answer without asking. The next morning, everything felt normal again. He greeted me with his usual smile, joked around in class, shoved my shoulder in the hallway like always. But every little touch now felt magnified. Every word carried weight. And I started noticing the things he didn't say. He never talked about girls anymore. He never asked about my type. He never flinched when our hands brushed. That Friday, during a group hangout at the local diner, I caught him staring again. But this time, when I met his gaze, he didn't look away. Instead, he leaned in just slightly and said something that sent a chill down my spine. "You ever feel like you're one conversation away from ruining everything?" I opened my mouth to respond, but before I could say a word, his ex-girlfriend walked through the door and waved at him, and he waved back, with a smile I hadn't seen in weeks. The moment his ex walked into that diner, everything in me locked up. I watched Cole smile at her, friendly, harmless, like nothing about it was strange. And maybe it wasn't. Maybe I was the one making it into something it wasn't. She waved, walked past, and didn't even stop to talk. Still, I couldn't ignore the twist in my stomach. He turned back to me like nothing had happened. Took a sip of his milkshake, cracked another joke about how bad the fries were that night. But I wasn't laughing. I kept wondering, was he trying to tell me something earlier? Or was I just reading way too much into every look, every pause, every unfinished sentence? The rest of the night blurred. I don't remember much after that. Just static. Just the sound of my thoughts bouncing around, louder than the conversation at the table. When he dropped me off that night, I barely looked at him. I mumbled a thanks and got out of the car before he could say anything else. But of course, I couldn't stay away. The next day, he texted me like nothing had changed. "Garage later?" was all it said. I stared at the screen for a long time before answering. Then I just typed, "Yeah." That evening, I found myself sitting in the same old spot on his garage couch, pretending not to overthink everything. He sat beside me with a soda in one hand and a beat-up football in the other, tossing it up and down lazily. "I feel like you've been quiet lately," he said after a while. I looked at him. Maybe I have. He glanced at me. Did I do something? I wanted to say no. I wanted to let it go, but the truth pressed against my chest too hard. I don't know what we're doing sometimes," I said. He stopped tossing the ball. "What do you mean?" I looked down at my hands. "This, us. It feels different lately. You act like it means something, and then you smile at your ex like you're still into her. I guess I'm just confused." The silence that followed was thick and uncomfortable. Then, softly, he said, "I don't like her anymore." I looked up. His voice had changed. Lower. Slower. She walked in and waved. I smiled. That was it. I didn't even think about it. I didn't know what to say. I wasn't expecting an answer that direct. He set the football down. "I've been confused too, okay? About a lot of things. About you." My heart skipped. I don't know what it means. I just know that lately, when I'm with you, it feels different, like I can breathe. He didn't look at me when he said it, just stared straight ahead, voice quiet. "You've always been easy to talk to," he continued. "But it's more than that now. I notice you all the time, and sometimes I catch myself wondering what would happen if I just said it." "Said what?" I asked, even though I already knew. He didn't answer. I waited. The tension between us felt like a storm about to break. My hand was resting on the couch, just a few inches from his. And I swear, for a second, he started to reach toward me. Then the garage door creaked open. His little brother poked his head in. "Mom says dinner's ready." Cole jumped slightly. "Yeah, okay, be there in a sec." His brother left, and the door shut again. The silence between us was deafening now. "I should go," I said, standing. He stood too. "Wait." I turned back. He was closer than I expected, and then, Without thinking, he reached out and touched my wrist. Just lightly, barely there. But it burned like a secret. "I didn't mean to confuse you," he said. "I'm just figuring it out." I nodded, my voice caught in my throat. "Yeah, me too." We stood there, not speaking, hands almost touching. And then I left, heart racing, skin on fire, mind full of a single question. What if he wanted more, but didn't know how to ask for it? I avoided him for 2 days. Not because I was angry, not because I didn't want to see him, but because I didn't trust myself to hide what I felt anymore. His touch had been brief, but it stayed with me like a mark on my skin. That light brush of fingers on my wrist, unspoken, trembling. A quiet truth that neither of us was ready to say out loud. And maybe that was the scariest part. I wanted him to say it. By the 3rd day, I caved. I texted him something pointless like, "Hey, you still suck at Mario Kart?" just to open the door. He replied immediately like he'd been waiting. "Come over tonight. Bring snacks. No excuses." So I did. When I arrived, the house was quieter than usual. The living room light was dimmed and there was a movie already playing on the TV, some action flick I didn't recognize. His parents were out for the night and his brother had crashed early. "It's just us," he said, grabbing the chips from my hand and tossing them onto the couch. We sat close, closer than we used to. Our arms didn't touch, but the space between us felt charged, like either of us could move an inch and everything would change. For a while, we watched the movie, or at least we pretended to. But my mind wasn't following the plot. It was on him. The way he rested his chin on his fist, the way his eyes darted to me when he thought I wasn't looking. Halfway through, the power flickered and the lights went out completely. We sat in sudden darkness, only the soft glow of the moon coming through the window. "Seriously?" he muttered. "Of all nights?" I laughed nervously. "Guess the universe wants us to talk." He was quiet for a second, then said, "Maybe we should." My chest tightened. "About what?" He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice was lower, slower. "About how everything feels different lately. About why I can't stop thinking about what it would be like if I didn't pull away this time." I turned toward him, heart pounding. "You're not the only one thinking about that." He exhaled, like he'd been holding something in for way too long. Then came the knock. We both froze. It wasn't loud, just soft, slow knocks on the front door. He stood, confused. "Who the hell?" I followed him to the entryway. He peeked through the peephole, then pulled back. "It's my ex," he whispered, confused. "Emma." "What?" "I don't know. I haven't talked to her in weeks." I took a step back. The warm air between us, the openness we'd finally reached, it all vanished in an instant. She was on the porch, bundled up, holding something in her hands. He opened the door. "Hey," she said, voice trembling. "I know this is weird. I needed to see you." He looked over his shoulder at me. I was already backing up. "I should go." "No, wait," he said, turning toward me. "You don't have to." But I did. I needed to. I grabbed my jacket, heart sinking, trying not to show anything on my face. "I'll text you," he said as I opened the door. I nodded. "Sure." As I stepped into the cold, I heard her voice behind me. "Is he who I think he is?" And I didn't stay long enough to hear his answer. I didn't hear from him that night. Not a text, not a call, nothing. I lay awake, staring at my phone, replaying the last 5 minutes over and over in my head. The way he looked at me, the way he didn't stop me, the way she asked that question with so much certainty in her voice. Is he who I think he is? I wanted to believe he defended me. I wanted to believe he said something honest. But I knew Cole. He avoided confrontation like the plague. If there was a way to dodge hard truths, he'd find it. The next morning, his name still didn't appear on my screen. That afternoon, I left the house just to feel the air on my face, to try to reset my thoughts. I walked aimlessly through the neighborhood until I found myself in front of his place, not even realizing where my legs had taken me. His car was there, but the house looked still. I didn't knock. I just stood there for a while, staring, until I heard the front door creak open. He was standing there in a hoodie and socks, hair messy, like he'd just woken up. You came. I didn't know what to say. You didn't text. I didn't know what to say. My mouth was dry. Did she stay? He shook his head. She just came to talk. That's all. Did you tell her about me? He hesitated. No. I looked down. Right. I wasn't ready, he said, and his voice was soft, almost like he hated admitting it. I nodded and turned to walk away, but he stepped outside and called after me. Wait. I stopped, not turning back. He came up behind me slowly, his presence quiet but heavy. I wanted to. I just didn't know how to explain something I'm still trying to understand myself. I turned finally and faced him. I don't need you to have all the answers, Cole. I just need to know if you feel this too, because I can't keep doing this guessing, this back and forth. I need to know I'm not the only one who's scared. He looked at me like he was unraveling. Then, almost in a whisper, he said, You're not. The air cracked between us. And then, without another word, he stepped forward and pulled me in. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't rushed. Just quiet and real. His forehead pressed against mine. Our hands didn't know where to go. My breath caught in my throat. I could feel his heartbeat, like it was echoing through his chest into mine. I've never done this before, he said. Me neither, I whispered. Not like this. He leaned in, lips brushing mine. Not quite a kiss, not yet, but enough to make my entire body tense and soften at the same time. When our lips finally met, it was gentle, uncertain, but so full of everything we hadn't said for weeks. It didn't last long, just a few seconds. But when he pulled back, his eyes searched mine with something close to fear. I don't know what this means, he said. Me neither, I replied. But I'm not going to pretend anymore. He nodded, slowly. Then the front door opened again. His dad stepped out, looked at both of us, and froze. Cole stepped back immediately. His entire body changed, shoulders stiffened, hands in his pockets. Hey, Dad, he said quickly. We were just talking. I could see it all in his eyes, the fear, the shame, the retreat. And just like that, the moment was gone. His dad said nothing, just nodded, went back inside, and closed the door. Cole wouldn't meet my eyes again. I should go, I said, stepping away. He didn't stop me this time, and as I walked down the street, my lips still tingling and my heart still racing, I couldn't stop thinking one thing. If something that real can be erased in seconds, how do I know it was ever safe to feel at all? He didn't talk to me in the days that followed, and I didn't go after him either. The silence between us said it all. He wasn't ready. Maybe he never would be. But something inside me had changed. For the first time, I hadn't hidden. I had felt something real, lived it fully, even without the guarantee of being loved back. A week later, I found a note in my locker. His handwriting. Just a few lines. I felt it too. I'm just not as brave as you. I read it 3 times before folding it carefully and slipping it into my pocket, like a piece of the person I had been in that moment. The boy who allowed himself to feel, who wanted something impossible and touched it for a second. On the last day of school, I saw him sitting under the tree where we used to eat lunch. He saw me too, and this time he didn't look away. He just held my gaze, silent, steady, like he was saying there was still something there. Maybe there always would be. But his timing wasn't mine. And that was okay. Life doesn't always give us perfect endings. But sometimes it gives us courage. The courage to have loved. The courage to be honest. The courage to look at someone and say, I really felt this. And I don't regret it. If this story touched you, ask yourself, how many times have you stayed silent because you were afraid your feelings wouldn't be returned? How many times have you held back just to protect what felt safe? Maybe today's the day to speak. If you thought of someone while watching this, share it with them. Leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications. We still have so many stories left to live and to tell.